Praise be Jesus and Mary. Today we honor a saint who followed in the footsteps of Christ along the way of the cross in a rather unique way. Saint Pio of Pietrelcina, more commonly known as Padre Pio, he participated in the sufferings of Christ, by that extraordinary mystical gift known as the stigmata. Bearing in one's own body the wounds of Christ, the marks of Jesus in one's hands, feet, and side. Padre Pio is the first priest that we know of to have received this mystical gift, whereas the first one to receive it at all, as far as we know, in church history, is St. Francis of Assisi, who was a deacon. And there have been many other instances of those who have received this gift, and it's interesting to note that the majority of them were women. Many of them received the gift of the stigmata. And what's unique about Padre Pio's case is also that he bore the stigmata for a good 50 years, and for each of those days, of those long years, he bled, we were told, about a pint of blood or so. It's pretty amazing. Padre Pio was born on May 25th, 1887 in Pietrelcina, baptized with the name Francesco Forgione. He entered the order of Capuchin Franciscan friars in 1903 at the age of 16 and was ordained a priest in 1910 at the age of 24. In 1916, he was sent to San Giovanni Rotondo, where, except for a few brief interruptions, here and there, he spent the rest of his life in the friary until his death, which took place on this day in 1968. The event that changed his life dramatically and forever was that of receiving the stigmata. And this took place on September 20th, 1918, while he was praying in the choir of his friary church before a crucifix. He writes about this experience to his spiritual director in this way. "Dear Father, I am dying of pain because of the wounds and the resulting embarrassment I feel deep in my soul. I am afraid that I shall bleed to death if the Lord does not hear my heartfelt supplication to relieve me of this condition." Padre Pio was asked many times if the stigmata actually hurt, and he would reply, somewhat jokingly, but also rather seriously, that it wasn't a mere ornament or decoration, but it really did cause him great suffering. He could say with St. Paul, "I bear the marks of Jesus on my body. I have been crucified with Christ." Padre Pio shared in the victimhood of Christ in a rather intimate way through the stigmata, and this in order to bring countless souls, to Christ or nearer to Christ. He brought many souls, especially closer to our Lord, or back to our Lord, through the sacrament of confession. He was something of an apostle of the confessional, and at a certain point, people would receive tickets, to get their spot in line, because otherwise there wasn't any order, as it were, and be a bit chaotic. But people would wait days even to go to confession to him, and he was generous in hearing confessions so long, even up to 12 hours at times. The victimhood of Padre Pio was especially noticeable when he celebrated Holy Mass. Physically, one could see on his hands, the wounds, because he couldn't wear the gloves that he usually wore. So you could see the blood-stained hands during Mass. Oftentimes, too, he would groan, during the Mass, groans of suffering. And oftentimes, too, you could see welling up in his eyes tears, as he would offer the Mass. One day someone asked him if standing up, at Mass caused him some discomfort or pain, because sometimes it was a bit longer than usual his masses, very longer pauses and so forth. And so his stigmatized feet must have been a bit, you could say, uncomfortable and painful during that time. And to this, Padre Pio responded, during Mass, I'm not standing, I'm hanging. Which is to say, he was hanging on the cross with Christ crucified during Holy Mass. Padre Pio would describe himself very simply and truthfully as just a friar who prays. He says, I'm just a friar who prays. And this is certainly the case. He prayed a great deal, and he was tireless, especially in his prayer of the Rosary. And he gradually increased the number of his rosaries every day to the point where he reached almost 100 rosaries or so, prayed in one given day. And he could do that because of another mystical gift, of being able to do various things at the same time, praying the rosary while engaging in other activities, for example. He was very well aware of Our Lady of Fatima's call to prayer, especially the prayer of the Rosary each day. And he responded very generously to that call. He would say that of the Rosary, with this weapon, you will win. You'll win all battles, spiritual battles you will have to engage in. He always wore the Rosary around his arm at night. A few days before his death, there's a story that you're probably well aware of. Padre Pio was getting into bed and said to one of the friars who was in his room, one of his assistants, give me my weapon. The friar, surprised and curious, asked him, where is the weapon? We cannot see anything. Padre Pio replied, it is in my habit, which you have just hung up. And after having gone through the pockets of his religious habit, the friars said to him, Padre, there's no weapon in your habit. We can only find your rosary beads there. And Padre Pio immediately replied, and is this not a weapon, the true weapon? So he would always recommend to his spiritual children to love Our Lady, make her loved, always recite the rosary. So he's certainly one of the giants, one of the giant saints, of our times. But we too can imitate him in his generosity in responding to the Lord's call extended to all of us, the call to prayer, the call to penance, and responding to Our Lady's call in particular of praying the Rosary and offering up penance for the salvation of souls, the conversion of souls. So let's be generous in our response as well. Praise be Jesus and Mary.
Et Jesu